Today's daf we're going to be learning is Bava Batra daf Kuf Kaf Gimel. It's the daf for Shabbat. We're going to get started with the breita at the bottom of Kuf Kaf Bet Amud Bet. We have a pretty long daf, but a lot of it is agadatot, and in fact, you might be familiar with a lot of them or some of them. So the breita starts off Tanu Rabbanan, bottom of Kuf Kaf Bet Amud Bet Latelo Pishnayim. The Bechor gets double portion. What does it mean, double portion? Pishnayim ke'echad. It means he gets a double portion, 2 portions more than everybody else. So meaning a double of whatever the other brothers get. So for example, if there's 2 brothers, then we'll split it into 3 parts, and that brother will get 2 portions. If we have 5 brothers, we'll split it into 6 parts, and the Bechor will get 3 portions. So in the first example, the Bechor got 2/3. And the second example, the Bechor got 1/3. Right? It'll be 2 out of 6. So now the Breita says, and it's a midrash halacha, which is structured as, here's the halacha, and we learn it from a pasuk, and then they say, well, maybe we don't. Maybe we actually learn the opposite. Maybe he gets 2 out of 3 portions, 2/3 of everything. And the other brothers, whoever's left, has to split the other third. So if there's 5 brothers, 2/3 will go to one brother, and 1/3 will be divided between the other 4 brothers. To which they answer, well, vidinu. It's just logical that we wouldn't do it in this way. Chalkom echad v'chalkom chamisha. The brother gets a portion with 1 if he has 1 brother, and he also gets the double portion if he has 5 brothers. Now, ma chalkom echad pishnayim ke'echad, just like when he's with 1 brother, he gets double what that brother gets. Af chalkom chamisha pishnayim ke'echad. Well, likewise, when you have this brother with 5 brothers, his comparison to him should be no different than a comparison to him and his other brothers. So if he gets double what the 1 brother gets, then he should get double what each of the 5 get. So that means he only gets a double portion and not 2/3 of the entire thing, which would end up being a lot more than double each of the brothers. But the Breita is not really satisfied with that, because the Breita says, what do you mean? Oh, theoretically, you could say the opposite. You could say, we can make a different comparison to the way he inherits with 1 and the way he inherits with 5. Just like, now pishnayim here we're going to say is 2/3. If he's with 1 brother, he gets 2/3. Maybe when he has 5 brothers, he should get 2/3 of all of the property. Therefore, in the end, they say, that's why in the end we learn it from the pasuk. Talmud lomar, v'haya b'yom hankilo et banav, on the day the father gives Yerusha, inheritance, to his sons. What do you see here? Well, it's not exactly clear from the simple reading, but the drasha is haTorah ribta nachala etzalachim. It says, right, when you're giving to all your sons, you have to give the pishnayim to the oldest. But it already mentioned first all the sons, so that means all the sons also get a significant portion. And therefore, we're not going to limit them to sharing that 1/3 and giving the 1 brother 2/3. And that's why we don't learn from the second option, but we go by the first option, which is 2 times the portion of each of the brothers, and not 2/3 of everything. Ve'omer, and if that's not further enough, good enough proof, and the Gemara is going to have to ask later, why is that a good enough? Why is that possibly not a good enough proof? We'll prove it from another place. Ve'omer, u'bnei Reuven b'chor Yisrael ki hu ha'bechor. Okay, here's the pasuk in Divrei Hayamim, in Chronicles, that the sons of Reuven, right, who was the bechor, because he was the bechor, he was the firstborn. He was the firstborn of Yaakov's children. But when he messed up the beds of his father, Yosef ben Yisrael. Okay, right? He disgraced the bed of his father, which there's a debate about how exactly he disgraced it, whether he actually slept with the Pilegesh, the concubine of his father, or he just moved the beds around. And it does say in the Torah, Vayishkav Reuven et Bilha, right? It sounded like he slept with Bilha. Here it sounds like he maybe, and this is where the opinion comes, that he just switched the beds. But it's not our topic for today, so we're going to move on. Yosef ben Yisrael. Yosef got the Bechor. And what did Yosef get as a Bechor? We'll see in a minute. But before we get there, we're going to have another, and we've finished the pasuk, below lityaches the Bechorah. In other words, Reuven didn't get the Bechor, but Yosef got it. Ve'omer, and another pasuk which says the same thing, which again we're going to ask, why do we need this to say the exact same thing we just said? Ki Yehuda gavar ba'achivu l'negid mimenu. Yehuda was stronger than his brothers and became in charge. But the habechora liYosef. But the firstborn, this is also in Chronicles, in that first chapter in Chronicles, but the firstborn went to Yosef. Now, okay, so far, what have we proven? Well, ne'emra bechora liYosef and ne'emra bechora lidorot. There's the bechor by Yosef, which we just saw from those two verses in Chronicles. And there's the bechor for the generations, which is the bechor who gets pishnayim that we saw in the Torah, which is our pasuk. Ma bechora, right? And the pasuk is, right, ki et bechor hasnu'ah. Yakir latetlo, right? Let's just start from the pasuk. In Dvarim chapter 21, verse 16, it says, Vaya biyom hanchilo panav. That's where we started before. On the day he gives his sons, okay, lo yuchal levakir et ben ova ben asnua. You can't give the ben ova instead of the ben asnua, the one, the son, the daughter, whatever, son of the wife he doesn't like. Ki et bechor ben asnia yakir latelo pishnayim, because the one who's the child of the one who's hated, which is the firstborn, gets double portion. Now here it appears the word ha-bechora. That's the word we're going to darshan. That's the bechora l'dorot for generations. Ma bechora hamura liYosef pishnayim ke'achad, af bechora hamura l'dorot pishnayim ke'achad. So just like the bechora by Yosef was pishnayim ke'achad, how do we know that? Well, we know that because there's Ephraim and Menashe. And if you're not sure, right, that Yosef ended up with two tribes. So we'll get there in a minute. But just like he got pishnayim ke'achad, af bechora amura l'dorot pishnayim ke'achad. So it must be the double portion of the firstborn is the same, two portions. Ve'omer, and if this wasn't enough psukim yet, it also says, ani natati lecha shechem echad al achecha. And this is how we know. You get one more portion over your brothers. Asher lakachta miyad emori b'charbi u'b'kashti. Okay, we are going to get this portion that I took from the Amori with my sword and my bow. Well, now they ask, wait a minute. How could you possibly say that he got it right from, this is a pasuk in Breishit. This is what Yaakov says to them, right? Right in Memchet, again, Breishit Memchet bet. So what we have here is you're going to get one more portion. Right, just a second. Right, this is the Ephraim and Menashe, the two tribes. And it says, Vayomer, then after he gives them the bracha, he says to Yosef, God will be with you, and I gave you one more portion. And that's right after, right? And I'm going to give you this lamb for the Amori that I got with my sword and my bow. First of all, where did we see that Yaakov captured land with a sword and a bow? We didn't. And the Gemara says, right, now, how do we know he didn't get it by sword and bow? Not really, because it doesn't tell us in the pasuk. Okay, here's a pasuk from Tehillim, and this is saying, right, we don't rely on the bow, and our sword is not what saves us, right? It's God. So ela charbizo tefillah. We say the cherev is prayer. How do we get this? Because there's a pasuk that says cherev pipiyot, and the pipiyot, right, the mouth of the sword, and how the sword is, you can do what you can do with the sword by speaking. This is an interesting thing to say about words in general, right? You better use words than killing, maybe. I don't know. But anyway, cherev pipiyot, they say, is a reference to tefillah. And kashti zo bakasha. And kashti, like bikashti, it's without the bet, but it has the same word, letters in it, the kuf and the kuf and the shin. And from there, we learn that just explains that pasuk. Okay, that's just an explanation of what Yaakov was saying there. But the main point is that Yosef is getting an extra portion. And what was that? Ephraim and Menashe, the two tribes. And therefore, we learn from there, from the Gzera Shava of the psukim, the two psukim we saw where the Bechorah was given to Yosef. And it says Bechorah in our pasuk of the Pishnayim. That's how we get it. So now the Gemara starts off with all my va'omer. So we started out, who can remember, but we started out with this other pasuk. It said, Vaya b'yom hanchilot banav. From there you see the banav must get a lot of nachala. We're not going to leave them with dividing up just 1/3. So my va'omer. So why do you need the whole second Gzera Shava there? Well, b'chi tema. Hi, b'chi Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka hu da'ata. You might have thought that was coming to teach what Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka said on the previous daf. And because they learn it from that pasuk, as we saw yesterday. Well, Tashma, Ubnei Reuven Bechor Yisrael. That's why you need the second pasuk, because maybe that pasuk is not free to teach us what we want, because it teaches us, if you remember, what did we learn? That the banav, if you want to decide to give all your possessions to one son, you can do it as long as there's someone who can inherit from you. If they're not one of your heirs, you can't give all of your possessions to some other person. If we want to do that nowadays, the only way to do that, right, we said, is give a gift. You can gift it to them, but you can't give it to them. So anyway, right, you can't give it to them as a Yerusha. It has to be a gift just before death. Okay, but anyway, Tashma, that's why we need Uvenei Reuven b'chor Yisrael. Now, what do we need then? The two psukim from Divrei Hayamim, where both of them basically said the Bechorah was given to Joseph. Well, the first pasuk we brought about Bnei Reuven, it said Nitna Bechorato. His Bechorah was given to Yosef, but it didn't say the word Bechorah, which is the same way the word appears in our pasuk. And our pasuk is at V'lo Mishpat Bechorah. So the second pasuk, where it said Ki Yehuda Gavar B'Achivu L'Negim Mimenu V'ha Bechorah L'Yosef, there it uses the word Bechorah. So if you were going to say, oh, you can't make a Zera Sheva, even though we do often. But if you want to, if someone's going to claim you can't make a Zera Sheva from Bechorato to Bechorah, well, we have the second pasuk. Okay, well then they say, Yosef Gufe, Mimai de Pishnayim Ke'achad Hava. Now, if you want to say maybe Joseph got more than double, maybe he also got 2/3. Tashma, Ani Natat Shchem Achad Alachecha. That's why we brought the last pasuk to say he got one more portion than the brothers. Amarle Rav Papa Labai. Rav Papa says Tabayim a dikla ba'alma. Maybe he got one more portion of another tree, a dekel, a palm tree. Maybe that was what Yaakov was telling him. Amarle Alech Amar Kra. Well, I can retort to you. Don't say Shchem Achad Alachecha means one extra tree. Ephraim and Menashe Reuven v'Shimon Yuli. Another pasuk, right? This is when Yaakov is giving the blessings to Ephraim and Menashe. He says they're going to be to me like Reuven and Shimon, which means they're going to be like two tribes. And their close circle. It's now clear beyond a shadow of a doubt that Bechorah means 2 portions out of everything and not, right, a double portion compared to all the other brothers, but you don't get 2/3 of all the property. Now we're already talking about the Bechorah and how Reuven lost the Bechorah, so we're going to get off on a tangent. Rabbi Chelbo asked Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, who's actually the one who says that Reuven didn't really sin, and he just moved the beds. Ma ra'a Yaakov, in other words, he didn't sin with tzniut, right, with actually sleeping with her. Ma ra'a Yaakov, shenatal b'chorah miReuven u'netana liYosef. Okay, some people explain that if you don't, right, what he's asking is, why did God take away the firstborn from Reuven and give it to Yosef? Now, if you take it literally that Reuven really sinned, then you're going to end up saying, well, he sinned in tzniut, and if you remember, Yaakov with Eshet Potiphar, Yosef with Eshet Potiphar stood up to her trying to seduce him, so that's why Yosef got it. But if you don't think that Reuven really sinned so badly, then you have to explain. So Mara'a ubachalalo yitzue aviv k'tiv. Well, it says because he disgraced the bed of his father. Ella. So what he meant was, no, I didn't mean really why did Reuven lose it? What I meant is, why did Yosef Ella Mara'a shenitzna Yosef? Why did Yosef get it? To which Rav Shmuel bar Nachmani answers him sholach hamashal. I'll give you an example. Lama davar domeh. To what is this like? I'll give you a parable. It's like someone who took in an orphan off the street. Later in life, the yatom got wealthy. And said, you know what? I'm going to give more now. I'm going to show, right? I'm going to give some of my wealth to the person who was good to me all that time. And that's what happened. Yosef helped Yaakov in Mitzrayim, right, when he went down to Egypt. So then Yaakov wanted to give back to Yosef at the end of his life. And right, the tables turned and decided, I'm going to give you more. Amarle. But he said, that doesn't help me still, Rabbi Chelbo says to Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani. What you're going to say, if Reuven hadn't done anything wrong, then Yosef wouldn't have gotten anything. In other words, he only got it because it was taken away from Reuven. But if Reuven hadn't sinned, then Yosef wouldn't have gotten anything. Ella, in other words, what he's basically saying is, the pasuk makes it clear that Reuven lost it and then it was given to Yosef. But according to what he was saying, it was just that Yosef was deserving of getting something extra, but doesn't mean it should be taken away from Reuven. So how do you explain that? To which Ella Rabbi Yochanan Rab Chal lo kachamar. So Rabbi Chelbo now says, well, I'll tell you what your Yonatan Rab Chal lo kachamar. Don't you know that Rabbi Yonatan, your rabbi, explained? Basically, he's saying, I don't accept your answer, and I'm going to tell you an answer that your own rabbi said, and you should have known. Really, Rachel should have had the firstborn. Why? Well, what's the story? And everybody knows the story. Jacob goes down into Lavan's house, right? Wants to marry Rachel. Instead is tricked into marrying Leah. And we're going to get into that whole story now. So really, Rachel was supposed to have the firstborn because she was supposed to be the first wife. Dichtiv, Ele Toldot Yaakov, Yosef. And in fact, when it lists the Toldot of Yaakov, usually the first thing they list is the firstborn son. It says Yosef. Yosef appears right then, right? Ele Toldot Yaakov. Yosef ben Shvatz Reshana, and then starts the whole Joseph story and how he gets put in the bore and all that. Now, the point is, that pasuk is telling you that really Yosef was meant to be the firstborn. Elas, what happened? Well, Kidamta Leah berachamim. Leah had asked for mercy, and on account of that, she got the firstborn. And mitoch tzniut shayta berachel, v'chzira kadosh baruch hu la. So let's go through. Rachel was supposed to have the firstborn. Leah asked for rachamim from God and ended up getting the firstborn, which we're going to see all this in the story. And because Rachel was so tznuah about it and so modest and humble about it, because I think humility would be the better word here, she ends up getting it back in the end. Okay? And that's really why Reuven should have gotten it, but it ends up going to Yosef. Again, according to, if you say that Reuven didn't really sin, then you have to explain a different reason why he lost it, and he lost it because of Rachel's humility. So let's explain. What does it mean? Leah got it from Rachamim. Well, Dichtiv Einei Leah Rakot, right? When we meet Leah, we find out that her eyes are soft, or something's wrong with them. Okay, it's a bad sign. My Rakot, what does this mean? Ilema Rakot Mamash, if we're going to say like she has bad eyes and there's something wrong with them. Well, if the Torah won't even call it an impure animal, a non-kosher animal, non-kosher, how do we know this? Dichtiv, mina be'ema Torah, it says from the kosher animals, umina be'ema asher inena Torah, and the animals that are not pure, that are not kosher. No, it doesn't call them non-kosher. It says, well, they're not kosher. It's a nice way of saying it. So, bikinut tzadikim dibarakadu, you think when you talk about tzadikim like Leah, they're going to say something negative about her, that she was ugly. Ella, Amar Rabbi Elazar, right? No way, no how. So comes Rabbi Elazar and explains, Shemat matnoteha arukot. Okay, so the first explanation is that her, one second, matnoteha arukot, right, dolot bekiuna, right. That I forgot what this was for a minute. Right, she ends up with good gifts because she ends up with the Kohanim and the Leviim, right? Levi came from her and the Malchut was from Yehuda. She ended up with good gifts, okay? She had sons who were worthy to be the Kohanim, Leviim, and the kings. Rav Amal, okay, and then it's actually a good thing. And Rakot from Arukot, she has a lot of gifts. Rav Amar Olam Rakot Mamash. No, it really is what we thought. V'lo Gnai Hula, Ela Shevach Hula, but it wasn't a bad thing, it was a good thing. She heard people talking on the streets, okay, by the crossroads. That's when the most people pass by on the crossroads. Rivka has two sons, and Lavan has two daughters. And she heard people saying, the older one's going to marry the older one, and the younger one's going to marry the younger one. And she would sit there and ask people who came by, what's he like? Ish Rahu, people say, he's really bad. Milastem Briot, he robs people. Katam Mama Asav, she would ask, what about the younger one? Ish Tam Yoshevo Alim, oh, he's such a good person. He's simple, he sits intense, right? Which they say also he was learning possibly the drasha. And she would cry until all her eyelashes fell out. And this is where it says, okay, when she gives birth, it says there, Vayar Hashem kisnu'a Leah, Vayiftach et Rachma v'Rachel kara. And then it says, God saw that Leah was hated. My snu'a, ilema snu'a, mamash, if we say she was really hated, Efshar b'gnut be'emat me'ah lo dibera katuv, b'gnut tzadikim dibera katuv. Wait, there's no way it says that Leah is hated as a negative thing about her, because just like we said before, even the non-kosher animals aren't called non-kosher. We're going to call Leah snu'ah. What is it? By what was Leah worthy to have a child first? Okay, it wasn't because she got married first, because she got married a week before Rachel. Okay, it was Yaakov had to work 7 years. Then he thought he was working for Rachel. Then they switched and they gave him Leah instead. Then after the 7 days after the marriage were over, he got Rachel, but he had to work another 7 years for her. But he married her right away. So theoretically, she still could have had the firstborn. But because God saw that she hated the actions of Esau, that's what I mean, kisnua. Because she hated the actions of Esau, for that reason, she merited to have the firstborn son. And that explains our first part about the rachamim. Then, right, she asked for mercy from God to save her, spare her from marrying Esau. Vayiftachet rachma. Then it says, right, so, and then she has a child. Now that was why she ended up with the firstborn. But then the tzniut of Rachel gave her back the firstborn. What's the tzniut of Rachel? Dichtiv vayaged Yaakov leRachel. It's interesting because this actually happened before. Okay, well, not exactly, because the truth is Leah prayed and ended up with Yaakov, and Rachel, the truth is they both showed it in the same instance, which is Rachel showed her tzniut. How so? Well, let's go through the story and what happened according to the Midrash and the way the Gemara tells the story. Vayaged Yaakov leRachel ki achi aviyahu v'chi ben Rivka. It's a very strange pasuk. Yaakov tells Rachel that he is the brother of her father. No, he's not the brother of her father. He's the nephew of her father, right? Because her father was Lavan, his sister was Rivka. Rivka was Yaakov's mother. So he was basically the uncle through his mother. And he ben Rivka, and he was the son of Rivka. But he wasn't the uncle. He wasn't Lavan's brother. He was Lavan's nephew. Ela Amarla. So what's hidden in that pasuk? Well, Amarla minsabali. He said, "Please marry me." Amarlein. She said, "Yes." Miu amara ma'ahu v'lo yachaleh. But my father's a trickster, and there's no way, or he's a difficult guy. There's no way he's going to allow it. Amarla, my ramautes. He said, "What's his ramaut? What does he do?" Amrale, i'ile achta. Amrale, she said to him, "Itli achta dekashisha minai." I have an older sister. And velo minsabalim, come on, there's no way he's going to let me get married before her. Amarla achiv ani beramaut. And now this is why he says, "I'm brother of your father. I'm his brother in ramaut. He's going to trick me. I'll trick him back." And this, we know Yaakov already has the trickery in him. After all, he stole the bracha from his brother, the Bechorah. So what does he say? Amar le'omi sharlu l'tzadike l'saguya b'ramauta. She says, what? You're a tzaddik. How can you do things like this? He says, yes, I can, because in navarti tavar v'mikesh tapal, right? If you're with a disgusting person, you're allowed to stoop to their, not exactly stoop to their level, but work with them at their level. So if I'm dealing with a Ramai, I'm allowed to do Ramaut. Masarla simanim. So he gave her simanim so that they would know. And if it wasn't really Rachel at the wedding, he wouldn't marry her. Kikama Leah, Savra Hashta Mikaspa Achatai, Misartina Niale, right? So when they switched, when Lavan said it's going to be Leah, he said, Rachel said, well, I'm going to give her the siman. Why? Because Hashta Mikaspa Achatai, she's going to be totally humiliated, right? When he basically asked for the siman, she doesn't have it in front of everybody at the wedding. It's going to be a big humiliation. I'm not willing to humiliate my sister in that way. Misartinu niala. So she gives the siman to Leah. Where do we get this from in the psukim? Only in the morning did he realize it was Leah, because she had tricked him with Rachel basically tricked him back by giving the siman to Leah. Right? So the pasuk says, in the morning, all of a sudden it was Leah. So they say, what? Before that it wasn't Leah? Well, what happened was, because he gave her the siman, he was so sure it was Rachel, and he only realized in the morning when he could see, right, when it was light out, he realized it was Leah. And that tells the story of the simanim, and that explained why Rachel was tznuah, and that goes back to explain why she ended up getting the Bechorah given back to her, because of the way she acted. So Leah started with the Rachamim, and that got her the first son, But in the end, Rachel gets it back because of her tzniut, her humility in that, which is shown in that story, that she wasn't really caring about herself, but she was worried about her sister's humiliation. Ba'amina Abba Khalifa. Now Abba Khalifa comes and asks, Abba Khalifa Karvaya, that was his name, Mi Rabbi Chia bar Abba. He asked Rabbi Chia bar Abba the following question. Bichlalan atamotzei shiv'im. Bipratan atamotzei shiv'im chaser echad. Now we're getting to, when they get into Egypt, 70 people went down to Mitzrayim. Okay, we were talking before about Yaakov having gone to Mitzrayim. Well, he goes with 70 people. But when you see the list in the Torah, there's 69 and not 70. Amar le to omai time Dina. Dina had a twin sister. How do we know this? Dichtiv ve'et Dina bito. This is actually the pasuk when she's born. Okay, she's born, and it says and Dina, the daughter. Ve'et. There's an extra and. Say it must have been she had a twin sister. And that's the 70th person that's missing. To which they answer, wait, if every time it says ve'et somebody's name, does that mean they have a twin? Well, time Binyamin. Well, then there must have been a twin with Binyamin. Dichtiv. Okay, turning now to Amubet, ve'et Binyamin achiv ben imo. Now, this is a bit strange pasuk. This is a pasuk, first of all, it's not in the context of when Binyamin is born, but it's in the context when Binyamin goes to Mitzrayim, when they finally bring him, and he sees, and Yosef sees his brother. It says, Vayar et Binyamin achiv ben imo. Sees Binyamin, the brother from his mother. Now, what's weird about this is that the actual pasuk doesn't say ve'et. So it's a little bit difficult, but earlier manuscripts, which is one of the best early manuscripts of the Gemara, I think it's the earliest maybe, it actually quotes a different pasuk. And it's a pasuk, ve'et Binyamin. It's when Yosef doesn't want, here, ve'et Binyamin achi Yosef lo shalach Yaakov et achiv. Yaakov didn't send Binyamin. And there it says ve'et. So it's still not as good as the Dina pasuk, because that's really when she's born. But still it says ve'et Binyamin achiv. And from there they say, well, it must be Binyamin had a twin sister. We don't know of any twin sister. So it can't possibly be. So that's not a good proof of who is missing. To which he now answers, Rabbi Chia bar Abba gives a different answer. He says something funny to introduce it. Amar Margalit tova ita b'yadiva, tam mevakesh la'abdami meni. Well, I really had a great answer, like a pearl, a gem, but you want to take it away from me? In other words, I didn't really want to tell you my good answer, but you don't like that answer? Fine, I'll give you a better answer. Now, why I didn't say the good answer in the first place is a good question. Did he really, and why is this answer such a great answer? I don't know, but some people say he was just trying to market it and get the guy to be excited about his answer and maybe perhaps also not try to knock it down. So, Haki Amar Rabbi Chama bar Chanina, he says, Zo Yocheved. Shorata b'derech v'leidata ben hachomot. This is, you might know, it's a famous drasha. It's Yocheved who is missing because she got pregnant. And her mother was pregnant with her already on the way. And that's why I counted 70, but she wasn't listed by name because she wasn't yet born. She was born right as they got into the walls of the city. Shene'emal, how do we know this? Well, it says, Asher yoda ota leLevi b'Mitzrayim. It says she was born to Levi in Egypt, which is to tell you her Leah was in Egypt, her birth. But she was already conceived before she got to Egypt. And that answers that question. Okay, now we have another question. We started with this question. Rabbi Chelbo asked Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani about Yaakov, took the Bechorah from Reuven and gave it to Yosef. Now we have another question. K'tiv, Vayihi kasher yalda Rachel et Yosef. So it says, right, when Rachel gave birth to Yosef, and then it says, right, Vayomer Yaakov Lavan, then Yaakov's right immediately in that same pasuk, he says to Lavan, let me go home. So why specifically when Yosef was born did he say this? Amar le ra'a Yaakov Avinu she'en zaro shel Esav nimsar ela biyad zaro shel Yosef. Well, he didn't want to go home before that because he was scared of Esav. But once Yosef was born, he realized, because he knew, again, this is quoting a pasuk later in the prophets, but that the children of Esav will be delivered to the hands of Yosef. How do we know this? Of the children of Yosef. Shenemar, in other words, he already knew that he could go back to face Esav. V'haya Beit Yaakov Eshu Beit Yosef la'ava uBeit Esav lakash. So Beit Yaakov will be a fire, Beit Yosef will be the flame, and Beit Esav will be like straw, they'll be burned by them. Okay, there's a pasuk from Ovadia. Eitive. So now they ask a question on this. Wait a minute. But we have Amalek. Now Amalek was the son of Esau. Okay, he was the son of Eliphaz, who was the son of Yosef of Esau. So now that means Amalek is Esau. And now we're going to see that who fought against Esau, none other than David. And David, and who fought against Amalek? David. And David was Machu Yehuda, not Yosef. So Etive, Vayakem David me'aneshef v'ada erev l'machoratam. He says, here's a difficulty. David hit them, right, slew them from the neshef v'ada erev l'machoratam. In other words, he basically destroyed them. The Amalekim. Amar le, akrayach nevi'e lo akrayach tuve. Well, whoever taught you Nevi'im, when you asked this question on him, in other words, again, Rabbi Chelbo asked Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, why when Yosef is born? To which Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani said it's because he knew he could fight against Esau now, because sons of Yosef are going to attack. Rabbi Chelbo says, but wait, it says, Vayakem David. To which Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani says, you obviously never learned Ketuvim, because look what it says in Divrei Yamin. Tichtiv, in the same story, in the description of the same story, Belachto el Tziklag, naflu alav mi Menashe, Edna v'Yozave v'Yidiel, u'Michael v'Yozeve v'Elihu, v'Tzilti, Rashe alafim asher leMenashe. Well, when David went to Tziklag, okay, the Amalekim captured Tziklag, and then David comes and fights them there. And it says, he took with him strong people from Menashe. Menashe is from Yosef. So there you see it. They were the ones who attacked the Amalekim, and there you have your answer. Mativ Rav Yosef, but Rav Yosef says, wait, it says in the Pasuk, Mehem min bnei Shimon, halchu lahar seir, anashim 500, uplatya u'na'aria u'rafia ve'uziel bnei Yishi b'rosham, vayakut she'erita pleta la'amalek, ve'yeshvu sham ad hayom hazeh. But here it says it was the bnei Shimon who went, and they attacked, right? They attacked the Amalekim, and it doesn't say it was Menashe. Amar Rabba bar Shila, Yishi mi b'nei Menashe. This is when there was Yishi listed there. B'nei Yishi are b'nei Menashe. How do we know that? Dichtiv u'b'nei Menashe chefer v'Yishi. And there you have it in the pasuk. It says the b'nei Menashe are chefer and Yishi. It's a bit of a problem, just like the pasuk before didn't say the ve'et. This pasuk b'nei Menashe chefer v'Yishi actually does not exist. Bit of a problem. So they claim that they say, well, it's a different pasuk, really. They maybe just kind of paraphrase the pasuk, but the pasuk reads like this. It's Divrei Yamim, also chapter 1. It's Divrei Yamim 1, chapter 5. Ve'ele Rashi Beit Avotam, ve'efer v'Yishi ve'Eliel v'chulei. Okay, and that was the Beit Avot of Menashe. So there Yishi's listed. It's just not those exact words in the pasuk. Tanu Rabbanan. Okay, we're back to the Bechor. We got on a huge sidetrack about Yosef. From there, we got into all sorts of interesting things. And Yosef getting the Bechor, and that's why we're here, because we're talking about the Bechor getting Pishnayim, and that was how we learned how we determine what Pishnayim is. Now we're back to the Bechor. Tanu Rabbanan. HaBechor notel Pishnayim b'zroa u'b'lchayayim u'b'keva u'b'mukdashim u'b'shevach sheshachun nerchasim lachar mitat avihen. Okay, maybe I should explain something before we start, which is the Bechor gets Pishnayim. Remember, b'muchzak v'lo b'ra'oi. Only things that the father left when the father died, but not things that were supposed to be, let's say, paid back to the father. So if the Kohen is supposed to get the Zroa l'chayayim in Keva and then dies, it goes to the son. Okay, and he gets, if it's a Bechor, he gets Pishnayim, also things that were sanctified that go to the Kohanim, and also things that Shavchu, if the property went up in value, then the Kohen will get double portion of the son. Sorry, this isn't a Kohen. This is just any Bechor will get a double portion. So the Gemara wants to know what this is exactly. Ketzah, what exactly, how does this play itself out? So now we're going to start with the last one. If the father left over a cow who was rented out to someone else, when he died, or it was grazing in the meadows and no one was dealing with the animal at all and feeding the animal and making it get better, and then the animal gives birth, bechor notel pishnayim. That's what we mean by this is shevach that happens on its own. So because it happened on its own, it would have happened anyway, right? Nobody was feeding the animal. Nobody was taking care of the animal. Someone else was taking care of the animal. It still goes to the bechor. Aval, and here's the case that does. Banu batim v'natu chamin, but if the kids started investing in the property of the father once the father died, and then it went up in value, ein bechor notel pishnayim. That's called ra'ui. That wasn't at the time of the death. So even though this animal gave birth after the death, since it was going to happen anyway, because and it wasn't on account of anyone feeding or taking care of the animal, then or anyone in the family doing it, then you get pishnai. So what's the case of those three? Those are parts that are given to the kohanim: the arm, the cheek, and the stomach of the animals. Eat, right? This is people would give these parts to the kohanim. If it got to the hands of the father, of course the son, and then the father died. Of course the son would get pishnai. So what are we talking about, right? And if it wasn't given to the father yet, then it should be something that wasn't in the hands of the father when he died, and the child shouldn't get the double portion. Like we said, only things that were in the father's possession. So what could it be? And it must be cases where there's a certain family that always gives to this family of kohanim. They're friends with them, and they always give them the gifts. And they had already slaughtered it, but they hadn't given it. And the person who says this must hold this braita, the author of the braita, even if you didn't take them out, separated from the animal yet, it's as if it's separated, and it's as if it was given to them. And that's why it's considered ra'ui and not muchzak, and that's why the bechor gets double portion. Mukdashim, lavdideininu. Okay, mukdashim, why would a kohen get a portion of the mukdash? It goes to God. It doesn't go to the kohanim. Well, b'kochim kalim, we must be talking about the kochim kalim, which are the portions of the sacrifice that the kohanim can eat. When you would have to say that this follows Rabbi Yossi Aglili's opinion, there's a machloket about this, whether we view kochim kalim, like parts of the sacrifice, let's say the meat of the korban chatat that the kohanim get to eat, is that considered mamon gavoa, belonging to God, and God just allows the kohanim to eat it, or is it considered like private property of the kohanim? So this opinion must hold it's private property of the kohanim, otherwise the bechor wouldn't get a double portion. He didn't get a double portion of God's stuff. Ditanya, as it says in a breita, u'ma'ala mal ba'Hashem l'chabot kochim kalim shehem mamon ba'alim divrei Rabbi Yossi Aglili. That's a pasuk actually that talks about if you deny, someone gives you something to watch and you deny that they gave it to you to watch, and you claim it's your own. And then it says, you denied it. And then it says, mal b'Hashem. What does this mal b'Hashem have anything to do? This is ben adam l'chavero. So it's to teach you that if you do, you make a claim of kochim kalim, like you steal someone's kochim kalim, claim they're yours and lie. And this, by the way, you have to take an oath in order to be obligated. What the pasuk says, so you swore falsely about something that you said was yours and it wasn't. It would even include kochim kalim because kochim kalim are owned by the owners. It's not something that's related to God. And there it's chichesh b'amito. It has to be ben adam l'chavero and not ben adam l'makom. And Rabbi Yosef Leah says this pasuk also refers to kochim kalim that you, let's say, stole and lied about under oath, because he views them as mamon ba'alim, and this must hold by that. So that was just explaining that braita. And now we're going to move on to the next section, which is actually going back to the braita and explaining one of the cases. Hiniach lahem avihem para mukcheret umuskeret biyad acherim, o shayta ro'eh ba'afar v'yalda b'chor notel pishnayim. So that we already explained. Now we're going to ask a question. Hashta mukcheret umuskeret tela b'reshut demara didi kaima amart shakil ro'eh ba'afar mebaya. Something doesn't really make sense here, because if I rented my animal out, okay, someone was using my animal for their work, and then I'm the bechor, or they were using my father dies, and I'm a firstborn son, I get double portion. Now, that's really not in my possession at the time. So, and then, right, the animal has offspring. That's what we're talking about when it was rented out. So if it's mine and no one else is using it, but it's in the meadow on its own, why do I even need to mention that? Obviously, I would get the offspring that was born. So the answer, hakamashlan, this is to teach you, it has to be mukheret or muskeret, like rented out or given to someone to work, specifically in a way that's like ro'ah ba'afar, meaning ma ro'ah ba'afar shvacha demimela ka'ate v'lo kachasre ba'mazona. It's just like there in ro'eh ba'afal, what the animal kind of grows on its own. V'lo kachasre ba'mazona, right? It didn't. They mean here. Just one second. Ba'mazona. They mean here. Right. In other words, chasra mazona means that the the sons don't have to pay the money for mizonot. They don't lose any money of theirs on account of the food. It must be a case where shvacha mimela ka'ate de lo chasra b'mazone. If someone's renting it out, it has to be that the orphans aren't paying for the food. If the orphans are paying for the food, then the sheva, which is the offspring, is on account of the orphans. So it would have to be a case that's similar to that, and that's why it actually mentions that case. Okay, so that's it for today. We're going to stop here. We're already into the next stuff. Again, let's just a quick review of what we learned. We started with how do we know Bechor gets 2 portions and not 2/3 of whatever the father has. And that we proved from a whole slew of psukim. We went through then each pasuk, what it was teaching us. From there, the context of a bunch of those psukim was about Yosef getting the Bechorah from Reuven. That was how we proved 2 portions, like Ephraim and Menashe. And then we had a whole question about why did the Bechorah get taken from Reuven and given to, right? Why was it specifically given to Yosef? And then we explained all of that whole story. And from that, we got to the whole history of the story of Rachel and Lavan, and Rachel and Yaakov and Leah, according to the elaborated Midrash story that we kind of mostly all grew up on. Then we moved to this other question about, we got to this question about the 70 people who was the missing person that wasn't, right, that was counted in the 70, but yet in the 69 names was not mentioned. And we, in the end, say it's Yocheved. They tried to say it was a twin sister of Dinah. They rejected that. Then we had another question that Rabbi Chalbo asked Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani about what's the connection between Yosef's birth and Yaakov deciding to go back to wanting to leave Lavan's house. He doesn't end up leaving Lavan's house at the time, but he wants to. And then or maybe he does at that point now. I forget now. Right? What? He goes 7 years. I think he doesn't yet leave. Anyway, I forgot. I got to go check that. Anyway, then we had, it's because he knew that once he had a child, Yosef was going to be the one to fight against Esau. Question with David, and we resolved that. And then we get to this thing about the Bechor Notel Pishnayim B'Yisrael L'Chaim Keva Mukdashim Shevach Sheshapchu L'Achar Mitat Avihem, even though they all sound like Ra'oi and not Mukzak. And in the end, we basically resolve, we try to explain what all those cases are so that we understand what they are. Okay, I'm just going to quickly look up that pasuk because I forgot exactly the order of events there. Right, we talked about all the order of events, but I just forgot now if it's exactly then when he actually succeeds to leave Lavan's house. I'm going to look. If you want to wait one quick second, that's Breishit Lamed. Okay, and right, and then it says, right, that is. It's the end of the 14 years, and it's not yet the end, though. That's when, after that, the whole story with the sheep happens. He's there still for another 6 years. That's just when Yaakov wants to leave, but he doesn't actually leave until 6 years later. Okay, with that, we finished today's daf. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov.